Hey guys, this is TopVerse. Sorry I haven't been posting lately. I usually post daily, but I've been sick for the past week. But today, I'm going to be talking about the tragic abduction of William Tyrrell in 2014. This is quite a bizarre story. September 2014, 3-year-old William Tyrrell was taken out of childcare for a surprise visit to his grandmother's house. The family packed up the car and made the 3-hour drive north to the Banneroon Drive in Kendall. On the morning of the 12th of September, the father left to find better signal for his business call, and the mother and the grandmother sat in the sun drinking tea while watching William and his sister play hide and seek in the large yard that wrapped around the house. William was wearing his favorite Spider-Man costume. At around 10:30 a.m., the woman went inside to make more tea. They never saw William again. The last thing his mother remembers before the disappearance was William shouting "Roar!" before running down the side of the house to hide. The woman became worried when they had not heard a noise from him for a while. They claimed this has been around 5 minutes. William's father soon returned from his errand and began searching the street and door-knocking neighbors. At 10:56, the mother called 000 to report him missing, as the property was directly across the road from Kendall State Forest. It was assumed at this point that they may have wandered off alone. The police arrived shortly after and began searching with 200 volunteers. The search continued overnight and included helicopters and motorbikes. The family noticed that the police had begun to look into the possibility of other scenarios as the bushland thickened and there was still no sign of the boy. Police, state emergency services, rural fire services, and members of the community searched day and night. But after 5 days of searching, there were still no leads, and the possibility of the boy having wandered off grew smaller. Strike Force Rosen was established by specialist police, including the Sex Crime Squad, and there were investigators, analysis, and forensic psychologists assigned to the case full-time. The disappearance soon became one of the largest investigations ever undertaken by the New South Wales Police Force. All the registered sex offenders in the area were questioned, and after 9 days, the huge search was scaled back in order to focus on the evidence that had been gathered. Investigators eventually ruled that there had been human intervention in his disappearance, but hoped that he would still be alive. Our police detection dog was only able to find William's scent within the backyard, which would suggest that he had been put into a vehicle as opposed to leaving on foot. The task force forensic psychologist suggested that the kidnapping was most likely an opportunistic crime, since no one but the child's parents and grandmother knew about the visit, so the kidnapper would have had to have another reason for being in the area, either visiting, living, or working. She continued that there was only a narrow window of opportunity to take the child from outside the property, which is located in a dead-end street. For 2 years, the public were under the impression that William was taken from his biological family, until it was revealed that at the time of the disappearance, the boy was in the care of the Department of Family and Community Service. William was being cared for by foster parents in out-of-home care. William's biological parents had 2 children together whilst in a violent, turbulent relationship. The couple had their daughter taken from them first, and so the 2 absconded with William and hid with him for almost 3 months. Eventually, welfare workers saw the 2 in a video store, and William, at 8 months old, was taken away to be with his sister in foster care. The couple were allowed to see the children 3 times a week at first, but at the time of the disappearance, they were only allowed to see him for 1 hour every 7 to 8 weeks. Carly Tyrrell had a violent past, having been charged with 3 serious assaults, 2 of which were against police officers. The biological mother of William admits to having made bad choices in the past, but still believes that she is a good mother. Brendan Collins was an abusive partner that had spent time in prison for numerous charges, including a common assault, drug offences, breach of bail, warrants, and violence against other person by stealing. At the time of the disappearance, Collins was in Silverwater Prison, awaiting sentencing on minor charges. The relationship between the father and the son was good, and William loved his biological dad. Since the disappearance, Collins had descended into heavy drug use and became homeless and unemployed. Collins' mother says that he is now too far gone on drugs, and he regularly rages in his room about protecting his children, whilst hoarding children's toys. Unfortunately, in cases like this, the biological parents will always be the first suspects. And at 4:30 p.m. on the day of the disappearance, investigators turned up at Carly's door to search the property for the missing boy and to ask some questions. Carly was heavily pregnant with her next child and had been shopping for baby clothes in Blacktown at the time of the disappearance. The ATM receipts and the dockets are able to confirm this alibi. One forensic psychologist and former police officer acknowledged that it is very likely that the veil over the biological parents made the investigation more difficult in the early stages. The truth was not revealed to the public until over 2 years after the disappearance. It must have been hard for the biological parents to remain silent while the foster parents were being identified as his real family during the investigation. Interestingly, it was also revealed that William is also the nephew of 5 Seconds to Summer guitarist Michael Clifford. Tradesman Bill Spedding was understood to have given the foster grandmother a quote for a washing machine repair a few days prior to the disappearance. Spedding was supposed to return to the property with a new part for the washing machine on the day of William's disappearance. The date on which the family arrived to the area is debated by some, and it may be possible that the boy was at the property when Spedding first visited the property. Spedding had previously been charged for multiple child sex offences in Victoria, including various counts of indecent assault and sexual intercourse with children between 1983 and 1985. He claims to have tried to call the grandmother in the morning, but when he couldn't get a hold of her, he went for a coffee with his wife and went to the school assembly of his grandchild. On January 2015, forensic teams searched Spedding's unit and pawn shop in Laurington. A number of items were seized, including computer equipment and a single mattress, and the septic tank on the property was drained. There was also a search of a maze-like structure underneath a rented home. One witness had called the police after hearing a child crying in a cabin where a middle-aged couple from Victoria stayed from September 28th to October 9th. The police searched this cabin in a caravan park, and the owner gave them the address of the couple. But little more is known about this, and whether there is any information connecting Spedding to this cabin. The police searched the house, dense bushland of Bonny Hills and Lake Cathy after other tip-offs. But again, it is unknown if there was anything found, and whether this connected to Spedding. There were reports of a Spider-Man toy being found in Spedding's work vehicle, but this was neither confirmed or denied by investigators. It would appear that there is no connection between Spedding and William's disappearance, and it is unclear whether he is still a person of interest in this case. In the months after William's disappearance, however, Spedding posted several related messages on Facebook, apparently encouraging those involved in the search by saying, "Don't give up looking," and a few days later asked, "Where is he?" Tony Jones, a person of interest in the disappearance. At age 60, Jones was a convicted pedophile who, in 2015, had been serving a 3-year sentence for an aggravated assault on an 11-year-old girl. Jones had been released early on parole and was living back in the community at the time of the disappearance. Jones was living just 20 minutes away from Kendall in Wauchope with a relative and would have no reason to be in Kendall. As a person of interest, Jones told police that he had been out collecting scrap metal on the day of the disappearance. Jones told others that he had borrowed a chainsaw from the council and was out in the bush. When questioned about the confusing alibis by the television show A Current Affair, Jones had become violent and aggressive, shouting that he had been helping a neighbour fix their hot water system, which was later denied by the neighbour. Relatives say that Jones had told them he was meeting up with another child sex offender, and he had returned home after lunch, drunk. Although Jones has previously denied any involvement in the disappearance, it appears that he may have met up with his friend Paul Bickford, another child sex offender, and the two know more than they are letting on. Not much is known about Bickford, other than at the time of the disappearance he was serving a suspended sentence for indecent assault of a girl with Asperger's syndrome. Bickford is known to frequently visit the local pub, and is described by many as being close friends with Jones. Bickford claims to have been having lunch in Port Macquarie with friends on the day of the disappearance, and denies ever being friends with Jones. Vehicles of interest. As the road was a no-through road in a secluded rural area, there was no reason to be there unless you had a purpose. So the cars that were seen in the vicinity on the day of the disappearance are of key significance. At 9 a.m. on the day of the disappearance, a dark green/grey coloured sedan drove past the driveway where William and his sister were riding their bikes. The car drove into the no-through road, performed a U-turn in a neighbour's driveway, and drove away. At 10:30 a.m, a four-wheel drive was seen driving out of Banneroon Drive, which would have been around the time of the disappearance, and the same vehicle was later witnessed speeding down another Kendall Street. On the 7th of September 2015, the police appealed for information about two cars that had been parked between two driveways opposite the house on the day of the disappearance. The driver's seat windows were down and the car was unknown to the locals and never seen again, which is quite suspicious in the area. Interestingly, Bickford owned a grey sedan that fit the car's description and an old white station wagon, like the one described that was seized from Jones' property in 2015. Jones denied ever driving the vehicle, saying that it was his ex-wife's car and she never let him drive it. Relatives, however, say that he regularly drove the car without her permission, and the car was taken by police and forensically examined. An anonymous tip-off was received by police about an abandoned rusty car that they had found hidden in the bushland surrounding Kendall, just a short drive from the site of the disappearance. By the time police arrived at the scene, the car had been flipped over and set alight. Some witnesses pointed out that it was the same car that Jones used to drive. Investigators seemed confident with the evidence that they were able to collect from the vehicle. However, this information was not made public at this point. This information regarding vehicles of interest was not made public knowledge until 12 months after the disappearance, and it is wondered whether an earlier public appeal could have helped the investigation significantly. The pedophile ring theory. At the beginning of the investigation, the suspect was believed to have been an opportunistic stranger in connection with a pedophile ring. However, this is not believed by investigators anymore, although this is not the direction that investigators are moving forward with. It is crucial to establish whether this change of direction is justified. Some experts believe that the suspect must have known the boy, and there is suggestion of stalking behavior prior to the disappearance, suggesting that the crime was not impulsive. Police revealed the escape route that they believe the suspect will have taken, and the route suggests that the person knew the area well, as many individuals would struggle to navigate through the thick bushland. The abduction occurred on a Friday morning around 10:30 a.m. It was broad daylight, and the individual would risk being seen from the balcony of the house, as well as the neighbouring properties. The individual would have been foreign to the area, which adds to the boldness of the crime. This would suggest that the individual was confident in his actions, possibly having done it numerous times before, or by planning it very carefully. This could also suggest inside knowledge, as the boy was only at the foster grandmother's house due to last-minute change in plans. At the time of the disappearance, there were over 20 registered sex offenders living in the surrounding area of Kendall. Evidence of an organised pedophile ring operating in the area that may explain the secrecy of the investigation. A larger-scale operation such as this would mean that investigators may not want public awareness, as they need to gather hard evidence that will definitely secure a conviction. Otherwise, evidence may be destroyed and people of interest could disappear. Although the family, both foster and biological, have seemingly been ruled out of the investigation, it must be noted that the foster parents have never ever publicly identified themselves for the safety of the daughter, who is still under their care and has not been returned to the biological mother. Not much is known about the foster family, and it has been suggested that they may have been involved in the disappearance in some way. As the public became more aware of the secretive investigations hindering on the finding of William, they started a petition to get the case a coroner inquest. The Daniel Morcombe inquest was crucial to solving the case, and the public feel that this is the only way the investigation will ever be solved. The petition pointed out that several miscarriages of justice, including that the birth family were gagged for years while other people of interest still remain anonymous. The public feel as though they have been kept in the dark, away from the truth, and the whole case is marred by lies and bullshit. Misinformation has purposely been published, and the public finally want to know the truth. The petition far surpassed the needed signatures, and the pressure finally built enough for an inquiry in 2019, which was recently announced. The inquiry will not have the power to criminally charge someone for the offence, but they can compel witnesses to talk, where otherwise might not have to. The inquest will also examine key pieces of evidence, and hopefully this will be helpful to the investigation. A line of inquiry into a high-risk persons of interest led to another search location in Battar Creek in June 2018. At the end of the 2-day search, investigators said there was a person of interest, that they knew why the area was being searched. Police also conducted a large-scale forensic search in the Kendall bushland over 4 weeks. The searchers collected new evidence, and police suggested that the suspect is believed to be living nearby. Investigators revealed that they had received almost 3,000 calls through Crime Stoppers, and there have been more than 1,000 alleged sightings of William in New South Wales, another 300 around Australia or overseas. Hundreds of people of interest and hundreds more potential vehicles of interest have been brought forward, with more than 450 addresses canvassed and more than 300 statements obtained. All this information has provided numerous lines of inquiry, and each has been followed meticulously. As there is so much secrecy surrounding the investigation, and there being several persons of interest that have never been named by the media, it is unlikely that the public will receive any new information before the case is solved. Police have advised the public that people close to the suspect may notice a change in the behaviour as the pressure of the investigation increases. The 2019 inquest and subsequent criminal proceedings should hopefully provide some answers and justice for the family, although it has been noted that the tragic probability is that William is no longer alive. There is currently a $1 million reward for information about the disappearance, even if the information does not lead to a conviction, which is one of the largest rewards in New South Wales history. Police are urging anyone with information about the disappearance of William Tyrrell to call Crime Stoppers on 1-800-333-000. This has been TopVerse. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Hey guys, this is TopVerse. Today, I'm going to send you on a wild ride with this one. This is probably the worst murder case I've ever heard. Junko Furuta was a 16-year-old Japanese girl who underwent 44 days of rape and torture before dying in the hands of her captors on November 22nd, 1989. Known throughout Japan as a concrete encased high school girl, the case of Junko Furuta drew nationwide attention owing to the sheer brutality the girl had to endure before death found her. Junko Furuta attended a high school in Masato in Saitama Prefecture, Japan. She was a good-looking, active teenager who enjoyed a lot of attention, and that made some people jealous. She did not smoke, did not drink alcohol, and did not do drugs, which was seen as very uncool in the eyes of more gangster-like teens. One of them, Hiroshi Miyano, had a crush on her, but not looking for a relationship. Junko Furuta turned him down. Hiroshi Miyano was the bully in the school, and being involved with the new generations of the Yakuza, nobody dared to oppose him. And Junko Furuta had the nerve to say no. On November 25th, 1988, she was kidnapped by 4 teenage boys, one of them being Hiroshi Miyano. The boys took Junko Furuta to the house owned by the parents of one of the kidnappers in the Ayase district of Adachi, Tokyo. While in captivity, the kidnappers forced Junko Furuta to call her parents and tell them that she'd run away and is going to stay with a friend, but insists that she's not in danger. Not able to realize what was coming and too scared to remain non-compliant, Junko did exactly as she was told, ultimately forestalling a manhunt that would have otherwise followed her disappearance. Parents of Nobuharu Minato, in whose house Junko Furuta was kept, visited their son on a few occasions, but under a threat of increased violence against her, Junko was requested to pretend that she was a girlfriend of one of the boys. However, even when it became apparent that she was a captive in the house, the parents did nothing for fear of retaliation from Hiroshi Miyano, who was known to have the Yakuza connections. During 44 days following her kidnapping, Junko Furuta was forced to withstand unspeakable suffering. What she went through before murder included: she was humiliated by being kept naked most of the time. She was raped almost every day in both the vagina and the anus. More than 100 men are believed to have raped her. The captor with Yakuza connections is said to have invited other Yakuza members to have a go at a 16-year-old. She's estimated to have gone through about 500 rapes. At one point, she was raped by 12 different men in one day. She endured physical beatings including hits with golf clubs and bashing of her face against the cement floor. The 100 men who are believed to have raped her had also reportedly enjoyed urinating on the girl frequently. To turn her rapists on, she was forced to masturbate in front of them and all the guests. She had various objects forced into her vagina and anus, including a bottle, an iron bar, scissors, roasting needles, grilled chicken skewers, etc. She was provided with only a limited supply of food or water. She was forced to eat live cockroaches and drink her own urine. She had fireworks forced up her anus and set them off, causing serious burns. She had her left nipple ripped off with pliers. She had dumbbells dropped on her stomach while laying on the floor with hands and feet tied up. This resulted in the loss of bowel control. She was hanged from the ceiling and used as a boxing bag. She was kept in a freezer for several hours. She had eyelids burned with hot wax and lighters. She had breasts pierced with sewing needles. She had her vagina and clitoris burnt with cigarettes and lighters. She had a hot light bulb inserted into her vagina and rubbed until it exploded inside. While she was only 1/4 through her ordeal, due to ongoing beatings, Junko Furuta was unable to breathe through her nose due to accumulation of the blood in her cavities. Her traumatized internal organs refused to accept food and water, so when she tried to drink, she instantly vomited, which not only kept her more dehydrated, it also agitated the perpetrators, who punished her with more beatings for soiling the carpet. At one point, when the attackers were resting after drinking, she tried to call the police, but was caught and punished by having her feet set on fire with burning lighter fluid. The large bottle the perpetrators forced up her anus caused internal injuries and ugly bleeding. Severe leg burns and badly bruised muscles left her unable to walk after 20 days of her ordeal. She wasn't able to handle anything with her hands anymore because her bones were smashed with weights and her fingernails cracked. Since it was winter, she was also forced to sleep on a balcony, exposed to cold temperatures. After 30 days, Junko Furuta was unable to urinate properly due to damage to internal organs and vulva from the insertion of foreign objects and burns from cigarettes and lighters. Her hands and feet were damaged so badly it took over an hour to crawl downstairs to the bathroom. Her eardrums were also damaged and her brain size was reduced. Junko Furuta's death during the 44 days when she was reportedly tortured, beaten, and raped. Junko Furuta begged her captors several times to just kill her and be done with it. They didn't grant her that favor. Instead, on January 4th, 1989, they challenged her to a game of Mahjong Solitaire. She won, and that pissed the boys off, so they treated her to a beating with an iron barbell and set her legs, arms, face, and stomach on fire after pouring lighter fluid on them. Being already badly beaten, dehydrated, and malnutritioned, Junko Furuta fell into shock and died the following day. The murderers stuffed the dead girl's body in a 55-gallon drum filled with concrete and disposed of it in Koto, Tokyo. Junko Furuta captors identified the names of 4 main captors who kidnapped, tortured, raped, and murdered Junko Furuta. They were withheld by the Japanese court because they were juveniles. However, the journalist from the Shugen Bushan magazine dug them out and published them, stating that after what they did to Junko Furuta, they don't deserve anyone to uphold the human rights. All 4 perpetrators were caught and trialed. However, because they were all underage when the crime was committed, they were to be trialed as juveniles, but eventually faced sentences of adults, except that the court withheld their identities. Still, given the severity of the crimes, the sentences they were handed out were rather low. By now, each of them is already out of jail. 3 of the boys served less than 8 years. The leader was originally sentenced to 17 years in prison, but after his appeal, instead of lowering his sentence, Judge Ryuji Yanase bumped his sentence to 20 years. Either way, they're all in their late 30s and all out of jail. Joe Kamisaku, who was released in August 1999, went back to prison in July 2004 for 7 years for the beating of a guy he thought was luring his girlfriend away from him. Because forensic examiners found sperm and pubic hair of other people on the corpse of Junko Furuta, a few more names were linked to her torture and murder. Kiyoshi Ihara Tetsu Nakamura, Junko Furuta's story in popular culture, torture and murder of Junko Furuta sparked international outrage, and her case inspired several movies and a manga illustrated by Kamata Yuji. The most noteworthy movie is the Concrete and Case High School Girl Murder Case, which was released in 1995. The movie was directed by Katsuya Matsumura and starred Eugene Kitagawa, a member of the band Yuzu, as the main culprit. A 2004 independently produced Japanese M Concrete is also based on the events leading to the murder of Junko Furuta. At least 3 books were written by Japanese authors who were inspired by the case. There are some that say the whole story behind Junko Furuta torture and murder is a hoax, but it's not the case. This is a horrible crime. This is not a hoax. And that's all for today, guys. I'm sorry if I messed up a few names, but I'm sure I'll get better. Thank you. Please subscribe. Hey guys, I'm TopVerse, and this is the story of Diane Downs. On the night of May 19, 1983, Diane Downs entered an emergency room bay in Springfield, Oregon. Her 3 children, Christy, 8, Cheryl, 7, and Danny, 3, were in the backseat covered in blood. They had been shot point blank. The emergency room staff declared Cheryl dead at the scene and placed the other 2 in hospital with life-threatening injuries. When questioned about the events that occurred, Downs explained the story of a man who flagged her down on the side of the dirt road while her 3 children were sleeping in the back seat. He demanded her car, she refused, and he shot her children. After getting away, she fled to the emergency room. During the struggle with the shaggy-haired man, she also obtained a shot in the left arm, but it was not life-threatening. While her children were still in hospital, Downs began giving media interviews, telling strange stories and explaining her innocence. Her story did not add up. It was full of extraneous details that lessened the legitimacy of her story. Describing that she was taking the children to sightsee in the dark while they were sleeping did not seem to make much sense. Police began investigating Downs. They were able to locate her secret journals that explained an affair she was having with a married man. The man she was involved with did not want children, which made her view them as a burden. Although a stroke impaired Christie's ability to speak, she was able to start telling police what she remembered about that night. Her story did not involve seeing a shaggy-haired man. This led police to arrest Downs in February 1984, with a trial beginning in May of the same year. However, Downs had a plan to gain sympathy from the jury. She seduced a man along with her postal route and was pregnant during her trial. After all the evidence was introduced against Downs, a star witness was placed on the stand. Following months of physical and mental therapy, Christy Downs was able to take the stand and tell the jury who shot her. Downs was found guilty and sentenced to life plus 50 years. She was able to give birth between the verdict and the sentencing. The baby, named Amy Elizabeth, was adopted by another family renamed Becky Babcock. Only 3 years into her sentence, Downs managed to escape from the prison in Oregon where she was being held. 2 weeks later, she was discovered just blocks from the prison in the home of another inmate's husband. She remains in prison today in California at a higher security facility. In 2008 and 2010, she was denied parole and must wait a decade before applying again. And that's all for today, guys. If you like this video, please subscribe if you want to see more. Hey guys, this is TopVerse. Today, I'm going to be talking about the case of Armin Meiwes, the cannibal with consent. This is a spine-tingling story, but also one that can create a split point of view for many when they learn about this case. So let's get into it. Born in the German town of Kassel, computer technician Meiwes led a very lonely childhood. His father was a stern man who was largely disinterested in his son. When the marriage broke up, when Meiwes was only 8 years old, he abandoned the family, never to contact them again. He later told the court during the murder trial that Meiwes had been a well-behaved little boy, but had been obsessed with the story of Hansel and Gretel, in particular the chapter about fattening up Hansel to cook and eat him. When Meiwes' father left, it fell to his mother to become the dominant parent, who would often admonish him in the public and insisted in accompanying him everywhere. Meiwes, lacking a father figure, created an imaginary brother called Frankie, through whom he vented his cannibalistic thoughts, as Frankie would listen to Meiwes, something his mother never did. At age 12, Meiwes began to fantasize about eating his friends so that they would become part of him and stay with him forever, a desperate solution for a very lonely and misunderstood only child. In 1999, Meiwes' mother died and left him the family's large mansion house in Amstetten, totally alone for the first time in his life, without the demands of his controlling mother. He reportedly constructed a shrine to her in the house, complete with a plastic mannequin that he would lay on a pillow each night. After his mother's death, he also developed an interest in internet pornography, particularly that featuring torture and pain, and through these internet sites, Meiwes found his way to his first chat rooms about cannibalism. Where this story gets truly strange is that Meiwes posted an advertisement on this chat room called the Cannibal Cafe, looking for a consenting victim so he could fully consume them and become one with each other. Meiwes' advertisement stated that he was looking for a normally built 18 to 25-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed. Bernd Brandes, an engineer from Berlin, answered the advertisement in March 2001. Many other people responded to the advertisement, but backed out. Meiwes did not attempt to force them to do anything against their will. The two made a videotape when they met on 9th March 2001 in Meiwes' home in the small town of Westerfield, west of Rottenburg, showcasing Meiwes amputating Brandes' penis with his arrangement and the two men attempting to eat it together. Before doing so, Brandes swallowed 20 sleeping pills and a bottle of cough syrup, likely causing an effect of slowed breathing and extreme tiredness. Brandes initially insisted that Meiwes attempted to bite his penis off. This did not work, and ultimately, Meiwes used a knife to remove it. Brandes apparently tried to eat some of his own penis raw, but could not, because it was too tough and, as he put it, chewy. Meiwes then fried his penis in a pan with salt, pepper, wine and garlic. He then fried it with some of Brandes' fat, but by then, it was too burnt to be consumed. He then chopped the penis up into chunks and fed it to his dog. According to court officials who saw the video, which has not been made public, Brandes may already have been too weakened from blood loss to eat any of his penis. Meiwes then ran Brandes a bar before going to read a Star Trek book or checking on Brandes every 15 minutes, during which time Brandes lay bleeding in the bath. Brandes continued to drift in and out of consciousness before finally collapsing again. After long hesitation and a prayer, Meiwes killed Brandes by stabbing him in the throat, after which he hung the body on a meat hook. The incident was recorded on a 4-hour videotape. Meiwes dismembered and ate the corpse over the next 10 months, storing body parts in his freezer under pizza boxes and consuming up to 20 kilograms or 44 pounds of the flesh. According to prosecutors, Meiwes committed the act for sexual pleasure. He was accused of murder for sexual satisfaction, a charge brought against him because cannibalism wasn't technically illegal under German law. Meiwes was arrested in December 2002 when a college student alerted the authorities to the new advertisements for victims online. Investigators searched his home and found body parts and the videotape of the killing. On the 30th of January 2004, Meiwes was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8 years and 6 months in prison. The case attracted considerable media attention. When speaking to a German newspaper, Meiwes admitted cannibalizing Brandes and expressed regret for his actions. He added he wants to write a biography with the aim of deterring anyone wanting to follow his footsteps. Websites dedicated to Meiwes starting appearing after his 2002 arrest, with people advertising for willing victims. They should go for a treatment, so it doesn't escalate as it did with me, said Meiwes. While in prison, Meiwes has since become a vegetarian. He believes there are about 800 cannibals still in Germany. Now, in 2021, Meiwes is still in prison. For reasons I can't seem to find, his sentence had been extended, but he is able to actually leave jail. Meiwes is allowed sunglasses and a cap so he isn't recognized as he walks through the town. 2 officers accompany him, a police investigator said. For security reasons, they take him to another federal state. There, he is allowed to walk through the town, the officer said. To the family next door where Armin lived way back in 2001, Armin Meiwes seemed the perfect neighbor. He mowed their lawn, repaired their car, and even invited them around for dinner. Other residents in the small German town of Rottenburg also believe there was nothing odd about the 42-year-old computer expert whose light burned late into the night inside his creaking mansion. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. This is TopVerse. I want to say thank you for all the support I've been getting lately. I appreciate it a lot. Thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe. Hey guys, this is TopVerse. Today I'm going to be talking about a strange murder that happened in New South Wales, dubbed the Pyjama Girl. This is a truly strange story. On September 1st, 1934, just outside Albury on the New South Wales border with Victoria, the burnt corpse of a young woman was found stuffed into a culvert under the road. The medical examiner found that the body had been placed into a Hessian bag. A towel had been wrapped around her head, which had been savagely beaten in, and only a few fabrics of her clothing remained. Although a bullet was found lodged in her throat, it was concluded that the injuries to her skull and brain were the cause of death. With no way to identify the body, it was initially preserved in ice at the Albury morgue. A sketch was put out in the newspapers, and a modified photograph of the corpse circulated. The body was then moved to be put on public display in Sydney with hopes of being identified. The woman was dubbed Pyjama Girl by the media in reference to the remnants of yellow and white exotic silk pyjamas that were found, and thus began one of Australia's longest and most sensational murder mysteries. In 1944, Antonia Agostini confessed to the Commissioner of New South Wales Police, William Mackay, whom he had known before the war, that he had killed his wife in Melbourne 10 years earlier. Agostini described how he had accidentally shot his wife and in panic driven her over the state line to Albury, where he had poured petrol on her and set her alight to hide the evidence. The Pyjama Girl had finally been identified as Linda Agostini. The husband was found guilty of manslaughter and received a 6-year sentence. He was released in 1948 and was deported back to Italy, where he died in 1969. While it may seem clear-cut, there are some details about this case that don't sit quite right. Agostini's statement was inconsistent with existing evidence. He mentioned the bullet wound, but said nothing of the extensive trauma to her skull and brain, mentioning later that he may have accidentally dropped the body. He also referred to the gun as a revolver when it should have been a pistol, something he would have known with his history of military service. He stated that he had turned off the road before he got to Albury, but to get where the body was discovered from Melbourne, he would have had to have driven straight through town. He described pouring petrol over the body when it was kerosene that had been discovered at the scene of the crime. His timings was not consistent with the crime, and he was vague about key details. The physical evidence identifying the body as Linda Agostini also contained discrepancies. The victim had blue eyes, whereas Linda's were brown, and the body proportions caused concern, with nose and bust sizes between women not matching. Did this body really belong to Linda Agostini? Or was Antonia Agostini used to force close a high-profile case that, after 10 years, was beginning to make the police look incompetent? What are your thoughts on this? This has been TopVerse. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Hey guys, this is TopVerse, and today we will be talking about Toyah Cordingley. This story is quite puzzling. You'll just have to listen to what I have to say. Toyah Cordingley was a 24-year-old animal-loving pharmacy assistant. Between 12 and 1 p.m. on Sunday, October 21st, 2018, Cordingley was shopping at Rusty's Markets, a popular fresh fruit and veg market in Cairns. She returned home briefly before heading out to walk her boyfriend's dog, Jersey, who was described as a larger than average dog. At around 2 to 2:30 p.m, Cordingley arrived at Wangari Beach. She left her Mitsubishi Lancer with the registration plate Toy 146 in the southern car park and went for a walk on the sand. Shortly after, her long-term boyfriend Marco began telling people that she was missing. Cordingley's mum, dad and brother began searching for her along the beach. They searched through the night with torches and eventually found Jersey, the dog that Cordingley had been walking, unharmed but tied up so tight that it wasn't able to sit down. The police and the SES soon joined the search, and when returning to the site, the dog was found. Troy Cordingley, the father, discovered the body in the sand dunes about 800 meters north of her car, marred with what police described as visible and violent injuries. The police told the community that they were seeking a male in connection to a potentially sexually related murder, but no further details about the state of the body have been released. The next day, forensic dogs and SES volunteers combed the beach for evidence. The police knocked on all the doors in the community to request voluntary DNA samples in aid in elimination, and witnesses were spoken to. Police issued the following statement in a public appeal for information. We'd like to speak to anybody who saw any suspicious activity or anything out of the ordinary in the Lake Placid or Caravonica area on Sunday afternoon, the 21st of October 2018, between 4 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. And secondly, we'd like to speak to anybody who has any dashcam footage from any vehicle travelling north on the Captain Cook Highway between Wangeti Beach and Clifton Beach between 4:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. And thirdly, we're also keen to speak to any females who have been approached by any males either acting inappropriately, aggressively, or making them feel uncomfortable in the last 12 months to 2 years, in any beach area or scheduled area between the northern beaches of Cairns and Cardwell, releasing the CCTV footage of her there while wearing a crocheted singlet top carrying a colourful striped bag. Police also urged the drivers of the 68 unidentified vehicles seen in the area at the time of the death to come forward in a process of elimination. Police also appealed to the public for any information on people that had any injuries that couldn't be accounted for, movements that couldn't be accounted for between 12 and 7 p.m. on October 21st, or if they appeared to have damaged or unaccounted for clothing. Police have been working to piece together the suspect's movement on a trip to Cairns on the day of Toyah's murder. The aim to test the suspect's DNA against samples located at the crime scene. A police search of Caravonica and Lake Placid in North Cairns was said to have yielded a number of items of interest, but police would not comment any further on the case. Over 800 calls have been made to Crime Stoppers to give information, and the hunt for the killer has become one of the highest profile cases in Queensland history. Person of interest. On December 8th, 7 News reported that a person of interest in the case has fled the country after booking a flight to India on the night of the murder. They continued that they had known about this person of interest for 2 weeks prior, but chose not to report it, out of respect for the family, who had also known about the POI. They identified the suspect as a former nurse, Rajwinder Singh. Singh had first come to attention when forensics triangulated Cordingley's mobile phone. Using that information, they were able to narrow down a 5-minute window in which she was in that location and used dashcam and traffic surveillance footage to compile a list of vehicles of interest. Singh had been identified within that footage. Singh had also been identified driving erratically through Cairns the night of the homicide before returning home and booking the flight. They also stated that there was potential forensic evidence linking the POI to the murder scene. Witnesses claimed to have seen Singh with multiple scratches and bite marks. However, none of this has been confirmed directly and may only be treated as speculation at this point. Singh had been working as an aged care nurse at Innisfail Hospital for 7 years and had a wife and 3 young children, including a baby. It is believed that he had resigned from his job and had become depressed and isolated. According to the family, he had been taking off for long stretches of time in the 7 weeks prior and was behaving strangely. However, they do not believe that he is capable of what he's being accused of, and they are firm believers that he is innocent. He had been reported missing by his family 3 days prior to the homicide. He returned home the night of the homicide and booked a flight back to Cairns, to his hometown of Amritsar in Punjab, India. He flew to Sydney that night and stayed with his sister before catching his flight the next day. He has not used credit cards or bank accounts since leaving Australia. Police claimed that the information issued by the reporter was incorrect, leaked and unauthorized, and believe that speculation surrounding elements of the investigation are not helpful and have the potential to jeopardize it. Authorities state that Singh is one of several people of interest, but has not been charged with anything at this point of time and may still be innocent of the crime. People are being urged not to accuse or threaten Singh or his family and to refrain from abuse while the investigation is ongoing, which the police describe as being far from over. Police are expectantly tight-lipped about the ongoing investigation since the media leak, and it is unlikely we will be given any more information about the case until an arrest is made. It is known that Queensland Police and the Australian Federal Police are liaising with the Interpol and the Indian authorities to find the man Singh so he can be extradited to Australia. His family have flown over to India in an attempt to locate him, and his blood relatives have supplied the police with DNA samples in an attempt to prove his innocence. At this point, however, no charges or arrests have been made. It is also known that witnesses have come forward describing two men behaving strangely, heading away from Wangari Beach around the time of the homicide. The witness said he was driving when he spotted two erratic men on the side of the road waving for help. The two men looked scruffy, had a flat tire and had lost their tire jack and were freaking out. Once they'd changed their tire, they hastily drove off in their white ute towards Cairns. Police are currently looking into who leaked the information to the media and are advising the public not to be fooled into thinking that the case is solved due to the recent information leak about a key suspect. The case is still ongoing with several other people of interest, and there are still public appeals for information to help with the investigation. Anyone at all with information that could assist the police further is urged to contact Crime Stoppers anonymously on 1-800-333-000. All the information will be in the description. This has been TopVerse. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I am TopVerse, and this is the Katherine Knight case. For this story, we are venturing to the land down under, my home country. This Australian tale of psychopathy, hatred, revenge, and unthinkable violence is one of the most disturbing and disgusting stories I've ever stumbled across. It's almost difficult to believe that such people exist. You know how sometimes you taste or smell something super nauseating and just have to get somebody else to smell it or taste it with you because it's so bad? That's kind of why I decided to tell this case. You have to see it to believe it. Katherine Mary Knight was thrust into a world and a family filled with chaos on October 5th, 1955 in Moree, New South Wales. From the moment she breathed her first breath, the world seemed to be against her. Kathy was the product of an affair between her mother, Barbara Rogan, and her father, Ken Knight. Rogan already had 4 sons, and she met Knight through her former husband. The conservative town they lived in was mortified by the affair. Ken was less of a husband and a father and more of a barbaric heathen. He was a violent alcoholic who raped Barbara multiple times a day and brutally beat the whole family, often with belts. Barbara frequently discussed details of the rapes with her children and told them how much she hated both men and sex. Katherine was reportedly sexually assaulted by numerous family members, but not her father, until she was 11 years old. These tragedies would help shape her lifelong distrust and disgust with men. With a home life steeped in fear, instability, and complete lack of control over her circumstances, Kathy became a notorious school bully who frequently picked on smaller children. She once attacked a schoolmate with a knife, and a teacher who broke the fight up was injured in the process. At the age of 15, Kathy dropped out of school, never having learned how to read or write, and took an unfulfilling job at a clothing store. 1 year later, Kathy landed her dream job, working in a slaughterhouse removing the internal organs of animals. Kathy loved chopping up animals and working with knives so much that she hung her first set of butcher knives over her head. She never knew when she might need them. It was oddly comforting to be able to take one last look at them before she went to sleep. It's hard to have a healthy view of relationships and sex when you've been sexually assaulted multiple times. Your dad rapes your mum, and your mum regularly tells you how much she hates the male species. But Kathy still tried to find love. Or maybe she just tried to find an easy target for her fury. In 1973, Kathy met co-worker David Kellett. They entered into a relationship together, and she promptly gained control of the relationship and dominated David in every way. David frequently got into bar fights, and Kathy would step in to back up her hard-drinking boyfriend. She didn't fear bigger, more powerful men. Kathy eventually earned herself a reputation for threatening violence anytime anyone displeased her. In 1974, the couple got married at Kathy's request. Most likely, the marriage was at her insistence. The couple showed up to the ceremony on a motorcycle and David was drunk. Instead of passing along heartfelt advice, guidance, or congratulations to a new son-in-law at the wedding, Kathy's mum told him, "You better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're fucked. Don't ever think of playing up on her. She'll fucking kill you." Barbara added that her daughter has got a screw loose somewhere. Kathy and David's wedding night was nothing if not memorable. Kathy tried to strangle David that night because he was only able to have intercourse with her 3 times and fell asleep. Mr. and Mrs. Kellett didn't exactly have what you would call a marriage made in heaven. Kathy was vindictive, jealous, and violent. Somewhere along the way, the couple made the absolute worst decision possible: to have children. Being pregnant did nothing to mellow Kathy. With her bun nearly baked in the oven, Kathy once burned all of David's clothes and shoes and smacked him in the back of the head with a frying pan during an argument. In fear for his life, David fled to a neighbor's house where he collapsed from a badly fractured skull. Somehow, Kathy, now behaving as a glowing expectant mother, convinced David not to press charges. The couple's daughter, Melissa Ann, was born in 1976. Shortly thereafter, David decided he'd had enough of his crazy wife. He left Kathy for another woman, and this enraged Kathy. The day after David called it quits, Kathy was spotted pushing Melissa Ann in a baby carriage down Main Street, violently rocking the carriage from side to side, slamming it against the walls and fences. She was admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth and diagnosed with postpartum depression. After spending several weeks in the hospital, Kathy was released, and it immediately became clear that the stint in the psych ward had done nothing to help the deranged woman. Just a day after being released, Kathy took her 2-month-old daughter to some railroad tracks and placed her on the railway line. Then, she stole an axe, wandered into town, and threatened the lives of several people. Poor Melissa was found and rescued from the railroad tracks by a man known in the area as Old Ted, just minutes before the train passed. Kathy was arrested and sent to St. Elmo's Hospital yet again, but she signed herself out the next day. Days later, Kathy grabbed her prize knife collection and slashed a woman in the face and demanded that she drive her to Queensland to find David. The woman was able to escape, but before the police arrived, Kathy managed to take a little boy hostage and threaten him with a knife. Police were forced to disarm the raging woman with brooms, and she was admitted to Morisset Psychiatric Hospital. The depth of Kathy's jealousy, vindictiveness, and anger shocked the nurses as they listened to their patient tell them how she planned to kill the mechanic who fixed David's car, which allowed David to leave her, then killed David and his mother when they arrived in Queensland. Upon learning the news, David, his mother, and his new girlfriend fled to Aberdeen. Now, either Kellett was still in love with Kathy, he felt bad for her, or he was too scared to leave her for good because when Kathy was released from the hospital, David, along with his mother, moved with Kathy to Woodbridge, a suburb of Brisbane. In March 1980, for reasons I will never understand, David and Kathy had a second child together, Natasha Marie. 4 years later, Kathy left David. She moved in with her parents, and then she rented a house in Muswell Brook. She went back to her slaughterhouse job, but she injured her back the following year and went on disability. She moved out of the rented house, and the government provided public housing in Aberdeen. In 1986, Kathy Knight met her next victim. David Saunders was a minor, and the two fell madly in love during a whirlwind courtship. Within months, David Saunders moved in with Kathy and her 2 children. However, Kathy was furious when Saunders decided to keep his apartment, even though she was living with her. She became jealous and suspicious, and the couple's relationship soon took a nosedive. Kathy, never one to suppress her true emotions and evil nature, once got so angry at Saunders that she slit the throat of his 2-month-old dingo puppy right in front of him to show him what she was capable of. The couple stayed together, however, and welcomed a baby girl later that year. Following the birth of Sarah, Saunders put a deposit on a house, which Kathy paid off with workers' compensation. In true psychotic fashion, She decorated the family's new abode with animal skins, horns, skulls, rusty animal traps, leather jackets, old boots, machetes, rakes, and pitchforks. Not a single inch of the house was left uncovered. One day in 1989, Kathy got into an argument with Saunders and retaliated by first hitting him in the face with an iron and then stabbing him with a pair of scissors. Saunders moved out, but soon returned home, only to find that Kathy had cut his clothing into pieces. Months later, he returned again to visit his daughter, but Kathy had been granted an apprehended violence order against him. In 1990, Kathy became pregnant by a 43-year-old co-worker, John Chillingworth. The following year, she gave birth to a son, Eric. It was the one and only romantic relationship Kathy would ever have that didn't include outrageous acts of violence. Chillingworth left Kathy after 3 years when he discovered that she was having a long-time affair with a man named John Price. Kathy's relationship with John Price started out fairly normal. The couple decided to live together in 1995. Price was the father of 2 older children who lived with him, and they seemed to like Kathy. Price's job as a miner was sufficient enough to keep Kathy comfortable. Kathy's comfort didn't last long, though. When she asked Price to marry her, he declined, and you can probably guess how Kathy reacted to the rejection. By the time Price hooked up with Kathy, he was well aware of her reputation. Maybe he thought their relationship would be different, or maybe he expected a certain level of abuse, but he never expected that falling in love with Kathy would have the consequences that it did. When Kathy didn't convince Price to marry her, she stole money from him and purchased an engagement ring for herself. When Price still refused to marry him, she went after his livelihood. Kathy knew that Price had still been stealing expired first aid kits out of the trash at work, so she reported him. Price was fired after 17 years on the job. Price kicked Kathy out to the curb, but they got back together just a few months later. There was a great deal of arguing during this time, and Kathy was determined to make Price's life as miserable as she could. She tried to take control of the house, which Price owned, fought with Price's children, and even lied and told friends and co-workers that David had molested her daughters. During one particularly heated argument, Kathy stabbed Price. Finally realizing the level of danger he was in, Price filed for a restraining order against Kathy on February 29, 2000, but was told the process might take several weeks. That very same day, Price warned friends and co-workers that if she didn't show up for work in the morning, it was because Kathy had killed him. Price knew his girlfriend wanted him dead. On the night of February 29, 2000, the same day Price applied for a protective order, Kathy went to his house while he was sleeping. The two had sex, and Price immediately dozed off. You know how much Kathy likes that. Gripping one of her recently sharpened knives, Kathy plunged the blade into her sleeping partner. Price leapt from the bed and ran out of the house in abject terror, but crazy Kathy overpowered him and stabbed him more than 37 times. Detective Senior Constable Peter Anthony Muschio stated,
I remember walking down the hallway, and at about shoulder height there were all these blood spatter marks on the walls. To me, it's indicative of each attack. He's absolutely fighting for his life. The bloke's just had a bonk in the bed when he wakes up, and then stab, stab, stab. He's getting up. There's arterial spurting on the robe and on the bed and on the doorway. There's a bloodied handprint or swipe on the western side of the door near the dressing table, and blood around the light switch. It looks like he's tried to turn the light switch on. And then all down the hallway there's bloody handprints everywhere. And he's almost made it. He's opened the front door. The door is shut. There's blood staining trajectory again flicking out across the front door. He's almost made it, but he wouldn't have survived. He would have been absolutely horrified, terrified, probably terrified more than horrified, trying to get out and all the time being stabbed.
But when Kathy started stabbing Price, she was just getting started. She was about to become one of the most notorious killers in Australian history, and the most notorious female killer in the country. Kathy was skilled at butchering animals, and Price's lifeless body was about to become her next project. First, she skinned Price and hung the skin from a hook in the living room. He was skinned post-mortem. Then she decapitated him and tossed him into a pot and cooked him with some vegetables. Kathy cooked several other body parts of Price's body, including his buttocks, and served them as steak along with the vegetables, a baked potato and gravy. She planned to serve the meals to Price's children and placed the food on 2 separate plates on a table, along with handwritten spiteful notes. But she wasn't quite finished yet. After setting out place cards for Price's children, she positioned the rest of Price's skin body on his favourite chair, crossing his legs. Although Kathy slaughtered and cooked her man, she didn't eat any of him herself. Sensing how much trouble she was in, Kathy instead opted to take a handful of pills in an attempt to kill herself. She lay down beside the headless, skinned corpse of her love and passed out, but didn't die. Fortunately, for the oldest Price children, they never had the chance to dine on their dad. They had been gone the previous night and hadn't yet returned. When a neighbour noticed that Price's car was still in the driveway and he hadn't gone to work, the neighbour knocked on his door to check on him. No one answered, and the neighbour noticed there was blood on the doorknob. She immediately phoned the police. When Kathy came home, she claimed to have no memory of the crime. She was to stand trial in October 2001, but suddenly changed her plea to guilty and was sentenced to life in prison, the first Australian woman to ever receive the sentence. Cannibal Katherine Knight's reign of terror was over. Now, in her early 60s, she is currently serving her sentence at Silverwater Women's Correctional Centre. Katherine Mary Knight was a miserable woman who had a miserable upbringing, and she took out her rage on the people she was supposed to love the most. She was terrified of being alone and terrified of losing control, but she was also a sane woman who knew what she was doing. Her comments regarding not signing her artwork suggest she knew it was wrong, but that doesn't mean she has empathy. Some people are just evil. That's what I believe. Why Kathy Knight turned out to be such a glaring example of evil, we may never know. And that's all for today, guys. If you like this video, please subscribe. See you for now.